We know it as the Hall, where our independence began, as the place where the foundation was laid for our Republican form of government, a source of pride, an icon, a place that gave birth to our greatest ideas, and yet hosted many of our worst. For a time, its presence faded, practically invisible. Its story is our story, a Philadelphia story. When the young nation and Commonwealth moved their capitals to the Potomac and the Susquehanna, Independence Hall, known then as the State House, seemed lost. Beer and cider flowed through the city, and Independence Hall was encircled by vice and debauchery. A Maryland artist and naturalist, Charles Willson Peale, had a different vision for the building. Soon, the second floor was transformed into Peale's Museum, Philadelphia Museum, America's first public science and art institution. A visitor could see mounted birds, unusual insects, his art, and artifacts from around the world. His pride and joy, a complete mastodon skeleton. Moses Williams, a former Peale family slave, cut silhouettes of the museum's visitors using the new Visio No Trace machine. Despite the promise of freedom of faith, religious toleration sometimes had its limits. In 1844, more than 2,000 Protestants, reeling from riots and mayhem in Kensington, converged onto the grounds of the Hall. There, waving the American flag they claimed Catholics had trampled, the Know-Nothings, as their political party was called, urged Americans to fight against the bloody hand of the Pope. And so, despite a Bill of Rights, the freedom of religion still faced a long battle. But it wasn't just Catholics who experienced extreme prejudice. African Americans, on their long road to freedom, sometimes found the birthplace of liberty to be the end of their own. Under the Compromise of 1850, a sellout to slavery, the Fugitive Slave Act was amended so that anyone who aided slaves could be arrested for treason. And in Philadelphia, accused fugitives found themselves facing trials at Independence Hall. When Henry Garnett stood trial in the first fugitive slave case, more than 2,000 African Americans watched. One reporter wrote that the sad irony of the moment was lost on no one. Of course, it was slavery that the Founding Fathers had passed on when they met for Continental and Constitutional Congresses. In 1861, throngs stood in front of the glorious old building to hear a newly elected president speak. Stated Abraham Lincoln, "In due time, the weights should be lifted from the shoulders of all men, and that all should have an equal chance." Lincoln told the crowd that if the nation ever compromised the principles of the Declaration of Independence, he would rather be assassinated on this spot. And when that fateful day came 4 years later, Lincoln's casket was carried back to Independence Hall to lie in state for 33 hours so nearly 75,000 Philadelphians could pay their respects. Independence Hall remained a place to rally for the founding principles and to bring citizens together to support national causes, the Centennial, the Bicentennial, and of course, the annual July 4th commemoration of our nation's birth. But as the city grew around it, Independence Hall became lost in its physical space and in the consciousness of Philadelphia. By the end of World War II, powerful civic leadership would have to come to its rescue. Unsightly structures were demolished, and the National Park Service created green space to restore a sense of majesty and reverence. Independence Hall was back, and with it, a newfound appreciation for our city's role in America's story. Time and again, as we sought new rights and freedoms, we came to Independence Hall to petition, pray, and protest for civil rights, against a draft and a controversial war, for the hope of democracy in foreign nations, for equal rights for women, the LGBTQ community, and so many others. There is so much to the story of Independence Hall, and like the story of our nation, it is a story of guiding and broken spirits, of lofty principles and contradiction. But when the layers are peeled back, we reveal its history, a story of a nation and a city. We reveal a story about us.